Now, earlier on today, the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is talking tough on immigration. In a speech this morning, the PM warned that the UK risks becoming an island of strangers as he launches his long-awaited immigration white paper, which he says, yes, that phrase, will take back control of our borders. And the Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper, was explaining the proposals to Christopher Hope earlier on today.
Particular measures around the skilled worker visas and the care visa that we've said care workers should not be being recruited from abroad. Those are changes that we're making straight away this year. Those will come in immediately over the course of this year.
But there was some early embarrassment for the government earlier on today as yet more boat arrivals were brought ashore, reminding us all what a battle the Prime Minister has on his hands. But the plans have been labelled as cruel, and ministers have been told that the sector would have collapsed long ago without foreign staff. And I'm joined now in the studio by the former Home Secretary Suella Braverman, MP. Suella, welcome to the show. It was a pleasure to have your company. Here we go again. It's Groundhog Day. We've had so many tough-talking stances on immigration from both this regime and, it has to be said, your own. What do you make of Sir Keir Starmer's speech today? I thought his SIM card had been hacked. I couldn't believe this was Sir Keir Starmer, the guy who, for, let's face it, his entire political career has been eschewing the benefits of open borders, the guy who sang the praises of immigration during the entire Brexit referendum and beyond.
Absolutely. Well, I wasn't convinced, for one, by Keir Starmer's grandstanding today. It's more hot air, it's more tough-sounding rhetoric on the back of appalling local election results. He's worried about the rise of reform, he's worried about those red wall seats, he's worried about GBNews viewers, and so he wants to, hastily put some announcements out to look like he's coming down tough on immigration. But the reality is that taken together, and even being very generous to the government, these measures really won't come close to dealing with the enormity of the problem that we have when it comes to legal migration. You'll remember, under my own government, the level approached nearly 1 million in 1 year of net migration. And whilst they've started to come down a little bit, we have numbers which are really out of control, and tweaks here and there, changes there and here and there, more bodies are being set up and more reviews are being done. Unfortunately, it won't really make a difference to the real problem that we're facing.
Our analysis we had done by Rob Bates from the Centre for Migration Control. He said, to be charitable, this might give 100,000 downturn, which still would leave net 300,000 coming in. May I ask you, Suella Braverman, what is it about the system that seems to deny the opportunity? You tried and tried and tried to get these numbers down, but nothing ever seemed to happen. Is it politicians that are at fault, or is the entire system pro-immigration?
I think it's a bit of both. I mean, it's pretty much 2 years ago that I was Home Secretary battling inside the Cabinet to deliver some meaningful changes to net migration. And we got a few granted in the May of 2023, and that's one of the reasons why we're beginning to see a fall. But it was not nearly enough of what we really needed. We need a cap, a hard cap. And that's really telling that Keir Starmer will, and even when pressed in the press conference today, would not commit to a hard cap on numbers. That doesn't give him any accountability. It doesn't allow people to know what they're getting or give us any predictability about how these changes will affect net migration. He won't pull out of the European Convention of Human Rights or scrap the Human Rights Act. In fact, he would worship at the altar of human rights laws. And really, unless we do that, we're not going to get a grip on illegal migration.
Suella Braverman, he got flack from the left, from his own MPs today, by declaring we are risking becoming a nation of strangers. I put it to you, we already are in many parts of Britain. 1 million people cannot speak English at all or well. There are parts of Britain now in Leicester, Labour seats, where 43% of the entire population aged over 16 barely speak any English. We've reached that point of no return. But this seems to be driven by Sir Keir Starmer saying what he thinks he needs to say to survive politically. Do you have any faith he actually believes in this?
No, I don't. He's really taking the British people for fools. I heard those comments about integration and about an island of strangers, and it actually reminded me a bit of Tony Blair. Tony Blair in the early 2000s was starting to sound tough on immigration and in particular integration, saying that if you come to the country, you need to speak English. You know, David Cameron said that multiculturalism had failed. There have been a succession of prime ministers who have made these tough-sounding speeches saying, you know, if you're coming from abroad to live in the UK, you've got to speak English. But, you know, 20 years on, we have a crisis when it comes to integration with whole, vicinities within towns and cities around the country where people don't speak English, where we are spending tens of millions of pounds on translation services in our public sector, making it easier for people not to speak the language. I would have liked him to say that we were going to scrap all of the money being funding translation services. That would have been quite convincing. But no, Keir Starmer won't do that.
It clearly seems that this Labour government is marching to the drum of Reform UK after those humiliating local elections and mayorals. Reform seems to have the momentum. I have to ask you, are you tempted?
Listen, I've been proud and humbled to have been elected by many thousands of people in Fareham Waterlooville less than a year ago as their Conservative MP, and I am going to be voting in the lobbies with my Conservative colleagues this evening. Spoken
like a true politician. Suella Braverman, always an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming into the show this evening. Now, my next guest, I'm joined by the CEO of the Home Care Association, and that's Dr. Sue Townsend. Dr. Jane Townsend. Jane, welcome to the show. Specifically around the care home sector today, it was singled out. The visas will be scrapped completely until 2028. Dr. Jane Townsend, what's your take on that? Does that concern you?
Well, it's the care sector as a whole. And I think it's important to say that people in the care sector would actually rather recruit locally. That's always been the case in the past. The only reason that we ended up having to recruit internationally is because there were just nobody coming forward for the jobs. And straight after the pandemic, the workforce numbers fell off a log. And that then began having real serious impact on people in our communities who were not being able to get into hospital, having to queue outside in ambulances. People were dying because of that. So the government opened up the recruitment from abroad. But unfortunately, the Home Office at the time didn't do a good job of organising it in a concerted fashion. They didn't come and talk to us. They didn't understand the sector. They issued sponsorship licenses to providers that weren't registered with the Care Quality Commission. Some people didn't do care at all. And a lot of the problems have come from that incompetence at the beginning. Now, I don't know what we're going to do, in all honesty, because they talk about fair pay agreement, they talk about training, but they've cut the budget for training. The fair pay agreement isn't coming anytime soon, and the Treasury keeps telling us there's no more money. So I imagine that we'll just end up back to that place where there isn't enough care, and we'll be back to ambulance queues again.
Jane, it just seems astonishing that we're not in a position where British people aren't being incentivised enough, they're not being trained. Do you think the entire, irrespective of it's Labour, Conservative, the entire establishment seems to have been asleep at the wheel and has this dependency on cheap foreign labour?
It's not cheap, though. The wages for overseas labour are actually higher. The minimum wage for an overseas worker is £12.82 an hour, whereas for a British one, it's £12.21. So that is a myth. But if you look back in our history, we've had 10 prime ministers over the last 40-something years. Every single one of them has ducked the issue of our ageing population. We are sleepwalking into a humanitarian and economic disaster, because in 20 years' time, there's going to be double the number of 85-year-olds as there are now. A quarter of us are going to be 65 and more. Who's going to care for everybody?
Do you know what? I think you're exactly right. I really do think there's been a dereliction of duty. I think we've fallen asleep at the wheel about this. You judge any nation, do you not, by how it takes care of its elderly? And Dr. Jane Townsend, I put it to you, we've outsourced that problem. We've buried our heads in the sand.
100%. And it affects all of us, not just older and disabled people, because younger people that become ill can't get into hospital because all the beds are taken by people who are old and disabled, because we're not supporting them at home in the community. So harm is going to come to people of all ages, and we're all in this together, and we need to find a solution together. So we're hoping that Baroness Louise Casey will be able to knock some heads together and come up with something that's more sensible for the longer term.
Beautiful stuff. Thank you for your passion. Thank you for your work. Thanks for all you do. Great guest. Please come back on again. That's the CEO of the Home Care Association, Dr. Jane Towson. Thank you. Have a fantastic evening. Wow, that was wonderful.